everyone, welcome back to Fort Nisqually. We're going to continue doing some videos showing you some of our 19th century practices and how you can translate those to your backyard and home over the next few months so you can keep learning and experimenting with us. What we've got here today is a couple pounds of white Sonora wheat. This is one of our 19th century wheat varieties that was actually introduced into Sonora, Mexico, worked its way up the whole west coast, and really became the premier grain that was feeding people during the Civil War in the 1860s. This is one of the varieties that we grew just this last year. So some of you may have been here throughout the year helping us plant, harvest, and thresh this grain. We're going to get started with this year's planting, and we're going to show you how you can do this in your own backyard. When we plant this out in our fields, and in the 19th century planting style, you'd plow the field, you'd be hand broadcasting the seed out across the field, then you'd come back over to rake that seed in with a harrow, and then let it grow out. But wheat like this can be started in your home garden, and you can actually make it way more productive this way. We're going to start some of these wheat seeds in some seedling flats right here. And what the Rodale Institute, an organic research site in Pennsylvania, has found is that by starting cereal grains like this in seedling flats and then transplanting them out into a really well-fertilized home garden, you can get more tillers, which is the stalk or the stem of the wheat or the oat or the barley, per plant than you would normally. So where we might get 1 to 3 tillers, which is going to have the seed head that you're going to harvest by broadcasting and planting it out in the field, you can transplant into your home garden, and you may get as many as 75 tillers on a single plant as opposed to 1, 2, or 3. So this can be way more productive and can be a really fun way for you to see the whole process, growing from seed, threshing it at home, and then grinding your own grain for bread. We're going to show you a couple little video clips that do this whole process. But we'll start with the seed. On these seedling flats, ideal spacing in the field or in the seedlings flat is that you want each wheat seed to have about 1 square inch to grow. I've got a little bit more than that in these plugs, but that's just fine. We're going to work with what we've got. So we're going to drop them in there. I'm just going to do 1 in each of these containers, and then you can see over in this larger one I've got 4. Depending on how these grow, I'll either thin this down to the strongest ones that we're going to transplant, or see if once they're going I can tease them apart and still use all 4. So we've got some popsicle sticks. We're going to use that just to label what variety this is going to be. We're also going to do some barley and oats later today. And then what day we started. We try to keep track every year of when we start the plants, when we harvest them, so we can get a better idea of what our growing season is going to be like for the next year. So drop them in, do them about 4 times the depth of whatever seed you're going to be planting. So we put ours in really only about a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch down into the plant. And then you can go ahead and water those in. Keep them moist pretty continually throughout as you're starting them. And then once you've got a good height on them, you can transplant those into your garden. And you'll be harvesting them late July into the early fall. I've got a little bit of cereal rye, which we grew as a cover crop this last year, and this still has some of the seed heads in this rye. So part 2 of the process, once we've harvested it, and you're going to know when it's ready in your backyard, when it's no longer doughy or milky. These ones are nice and hard, but if you took the seed head out and it was doughy, you could squish it in between your fingers and kind of spread it out, then that's not ready yet. Or if you could crush it with your fingernail and it had a little bit of white milk coming out, you're getting really close. And then we let ours dry out to the point that it's nice and hard. You can drop it and it gives a little clink or plunk. Those hard seeds are ready for you to store, and they'll be ready for you to grind. In order to get the seed head out of the grain, you have to do what's called threshing. Now in the 19th century, we use something like a flail. You can see ours is busted out here and needs to be repaired. But the flail is going to be what we're going to use as a beater. We'll spread the grains out on a tarp or ground cloth like this, and then we're going to flail them or thresh them, and that's going to knock the seed heads out of the dry grain. The grain has to be really dry, so we let it cure in the field for sometimes a couple weeks until it's really nice and brittle, because otherwise it's not going to release those seed heads. If you're doing this at home with the wheat that you started this spring and put into your garden, you can use all sorts of things as a flail. A wiffle ball bat works really well. Use a tennis racket, anything that you can use to beat and knock those seed heads off. You can even put another cover, and some of our records talk about Native women dancing on top of the grain to thresh it. So have a dance party, use a tennis racket, do whatever you want, but you want to get those seed heads out, which you're going to then gather up, and you can see this is the wheat that we just planted, but we're going to need to winnow it or separate it from all of the chaff, the dirt, the junk that's in there. So we'll show you how to do that on the next step here. Okay, once we've got the seed heads out of the grain, we need to separate them from all the chaff, all the dirt, the junk, the little pieces of straw. This is a winnowing basket or hand basket. You can use this to toss the grain. I like to tell people it's kind of like if you're tossing stir fry in a wok. You're going to toss the grain, the chaff is going to come up here high, and then the wind is going to blow away the light stuff, and the heavy seeds are going to fall back in. So this is at the early time of Fort Nisqually how a lot of the grain was being processed, was just hand baskets, some of them much larger than this, to separate mechanically the heavy seed heads from the light chaff which is going to float away on a windy day. We're going to go into the granary. We're going to show you the winnowing machine, which was kind of the new 19th century technology that they began to use to speed this process up. Right in here, it's a little bit dark, but you can see this blue winnowing machine. This was a mid-19th century machine that we got here at Fort Nisqually about halfway through our time. And basically what it does is the rotor, the hand crank that you see on the right side, is going to turn a big turbine, a fan in the middle of that. That's going to generate your windy day, even if it's not windy. So we're going to make the wind ourselves. And then there's going to be a series of different wires that are going to sift the grain for us. So it's going to separate all the dirt, all the chaff. It's going to blow a lot of it out the front, and then it's going to save our seed, and it's going to bring it out nice and clean for us. We've got